All right, guys, what's going on? It is Super Bowl week, and this is kind of a hybrid of the Sage Rosenfels Experience. We want to talk about that, the new show here on Iowa Everywhere. And I have on my trusty little notebook a handful of Super Bowl related questions for our NFL guru, Sage Rosenfels. How was your weekend, my friend? Clones beat Kansas. Always tough to beat that. Good weekend.
I did not have a chance to watch that game, but I was FaceTiming with my son, and he's got his camera or his phone in front of his face, and he kept looking up. I'm like, is there somebody else in the room as we're having like this quasi serious conversation about like a summer internship and this and that? And he flips his phone around and it's the Cyclones beating the Jayhawks by about 12. And I was
Just
like,
crushed
well,
it.
I see why whatever I'm saying is unimportant because this is obviously more important. And, my son went to like 4 or 5 elementary schools. And so, he was, born in Dubuque, Iowa, and lived in Virginia as a baby, and of course Miami for 4 years, elementary school in Houston, Minnesota, Boulder, Colorado, ended up in Omaha, and yet through all that, he is a Cyclone fan. I mean, he is one of those. He's a fanatic. He calls me after games. Why did we do this? But he's basketball is probably more than football is something that he loves more, and so he is really enjoying watching this team, despite the fact that it doesn't seem like they have like superstar. They don't
No,
have like a superstar, but man, they play so well together. They move the ball so quickly in offense, and they still got that great Otzenberger defense, and obviously they're playing great basketball right now.
I told Bloom last night that I think this might be one of my favorite teams that I've ever watched. They're just like last year's team play hard and did all those things, but like when you're scoring in the 40s, it's still like it's not that fun to watch. This year's
50,
team,
55, 52
yeah,
was like the average game last year. 55,
yeah.
52. It was
Like
like
this
watching
year's team has all those traits, but they can score 80 if they need to.
yeah. Yeah, they have a lot of guys who can shoot the basketball. I feel like they have players that can play more than one position on like offense and defense. And that's always nice to have like a big point guard who can, play more than like defensively can guard more than just a point guard on the other side. It can be sort of multifunctional. And it's fun to watch. I think Otzenberger is a fantastic head coach. Hopefully Iowa State can keep him for a long, long time.
Hope so too. Well, we'll get into the Super Bowl. Before we do that, I want to talk about your new show, and we're kind of just rebranding what Rose and Bloom was, and we're not kicking Bloom off. Bloom is still on the network. You guys are going to hear from him a lot, but we were having, frankly, issues getting people's schedules to work out, all that stuff, and this was kind of a mutual idea that we had. Like, you have all these like people, and you have all these crazy contacts and interests, and I admire it because I'm a lot that way too. Like I had like a ghost hunter on my personal podcast Halloween and geeked out. Like I would love
Yeah.
to interview like an astronaut. Like I have all the so I think it's really cool, and we're gonna call it the Sage Rosenfels Experience, where you're just gonna geek out with a bunch of your friends and get curious, and we'll see where
Yes,
it
it's
goes. How do you describe it?
well, it's very similar to the Jimi Hendrix experience, basically. It's just not music, it's generally sports. No, I think the thought process was when you asked me to come on the Iowa Everywhere network and that Brent and I would do a show together, I was like, great, because he was a guy that could, take our show and do all the manipulations and the edits and all this behind the scenes. That's not my specialty by any means. And but also I've known him for 10 years now, calling the Iowa State game. It seemed like about every other year there for a while, one of those early games as far as football. But he's got so much information. He's the encyclopedia. But yeah, trying to get he and I to match up on a time with some sort of guest that I was bringing in became more challenging. So next thing you know, it just seemed like more often than not, I was just doing it myself, which made the most sense. I mean, usually the guest that I was bringing in was someone that I had built a relationship with somewhere along my journey, college football, pro football. somewhere along there. And since my career ended about 10, 11 years ago. So it just made sense that it ends up just being a conversation between me and some guest. And so that's sort of the way we decided to go in that direction. I think it's a good way to go. I'm looking forward to it. And, there's weeks where it's like, who can I talk about this week? And you sort of look around, whether it's the NFL or other news around the world, and like, oh, that'd be a good guest. And this week, of course, I had DeMaurice Smith on.
That was great.
And I thought it was, it's a good time. He's been there for 13 years. He's coming to the end of his tenure as the executive director of the National Football League Players Association. It's a big job, and it's an interesting job. I always found him as an interesting guy to talk to. And hopefully the listeners got something out of it. So I thought the timing was right. That to interview him in March isn't all that exciting, but Super Bowl week, as we get into this thing here and sort of in this break in Super Bowl week, I wasn't going to talk about the Pro Bowl or the Pro Bowl games or whatever they're doing now. But I thought that was a good interview, and hopefully, almost weekly, I can get somebody that is of interest to the listeners. And I enjoy the aspect of not being the analyst. I have been for 10 plus years now. And really, as a player, you're like an analyst too. Ask me a question, I answer it. And then you get to this role of like, why did the Vikings win or lose this game? And you answer that question. But to be on the other side sort of the microphone per se, and be able to ask these questions, and of course, research beforehand. And I feel like I write down 30 questions and I ask about 7 of them. But that's been really enjoyable for me. And in some ways, just to learn about the person, not necessarily about the topic at hand, but actually learn some information about this person that I know, but I don't know, their life story. And I feel like, to me, that's been an enjoyable aspect of doing this Sage Rosenfels Experience show.
And we're going to invest in it too. We got you a producer, Aiden Wyatt, who's a young man, really, really sharp. He loves the behind the scenes stuff. So we're going to make it really sharp with repurposed clips everywhere, and it'll only get better. So I'm excited for it. It'll be a great piece every week here, or whenever you're able to do it. You still live a life of a lot of travel and stuff too, so it probably won't be every week, but regardless.
Well, one of the reasons this sort of the podcast show, and probably why we call this Sage Rosenfels Experience, is because I do travel a lot. I'm in Omaha. That's my main home, my main residence, but I do travel around the country to various cities and various times. I was in Miami last a week and a half ago or so. Well, it's why in Miami? Nothing in particular, just that it's 85 degrees, and that to me is the warmest place in the country in January. So I do get to travel, but with those travels, hopefully becomes some interviews as well. So I will be going over to Phoenix on Wednesday, and hopefully I can get an interview or two over there for the Sage Rosenfels Experience. And the Super Bowl is something I enjoy going to every year. And I usually don't go to the game. I've only been to the game once, but I enjoy the networking, the old relationships that I had built when I was playing. And since then, the dinners, meeting up with people. Of course, there are various parties. I'm getting a little old for those parties. It seems like those are mostly for like players and people in their 20s and low 30s. But
I'd tag along with you at the Super Bowl parties if Brock would have been there. I was just going to be your sidekick.
Listen, if Brock would have made the Super Bowl, I talked to you. I was like, listen, you guys need to.
I was coming.
You need to go down or whoever, because this is a unique. Mike Silver covers. He works for in San Francisco. He covers the 49ers and longtime NFL writer, Sports Illustrated, and we were sort of comparing the Brock Purdy. This is like 2 weeks in, and I was like, Brock Purdy's going to win the Super Bowl this year, and we're comparing that to the Kurt Warner sort of out of nowhere situation. And Kurt won the Super Bowl, but Mike Silver wrote his book that ended up being the American Underdog movie that I'm sure a few Iowans had a chance to see.
All right. Before we get into the Super Bowl, I want to encourage everybody to download the Circa Sports Iowa app for the big game coming up on Sunday. The line currently is Circa has the Eagles as a 1.5 point favorite. If you like Philly, this is a good spot to bet. There's a lot of twos out there across the board. Circa still has Philly at 1.5. Also, wanted to throw it out there. If you go to iowaeverywhere.com, this is probably the last day you're going to have to sign up for our big game package with Circa, which includes a $300 gift card for Fairway, so you can stock up on whatever you need for your big game party. And we are also doing the Game Watch with Jordan Bohannon and Jared Stansberry out at Wellman's coming up on Sunday. Oh, also, the biggest part of it, if you win the drawing, you get a free trip for two to Circa in Las Vegas. That is sick. It is the best sports book in the world. All right, I have just a bunch of questions jotted down for you here. So this is how I see this game. I lean Philly, and here's why. I think that I'm the older, like the more we watch, I'm more about the loaded roster than I am the elite quarterback. I think they have a better roster. I know that Mahomes will be a lot more healthy than the last time we saw him, but I just like Philly. That defensive line, I feel like they're going to pressure him a lot. That's just kind of where I am. But that's how I view the Super Bowl. I think it's really interesting. Loaded roster, cheap quarterback versus expensive quarterback. Now, the Chiefs are a little different because they got rid of Tyreek Hill, which made their roster better as a whole. But that's what this comes down to me. I think it's really a fascinating game just when you look at roster makeup in the NFL.
Yeah, it's like a team with superstars. Kansas City, if you took all 100 guys or whatever it is, 90 some guys that will dress for this game, and you ranked them from best to worst. Patrick Mahomes is the best player at the most important position.
No doubt.
Travis Kelce's the best tight end in football. Chris Jones is one of the best defensive linemen in football. So I sort of feel like the star power wise, the Chiefs have the top talent in this game. But overall, Howie Roseman, the GM of Philadelphia, has done what other teams are sometimes trying to do. And this is not some new, really, it's a business model. It's not a new business model. This really started in the sort of early Russell Wilson, Colin Kaepernick era of the NFL. So 10 years ago, Kaepernick was a second round pick. Russell Wilson was a third round pick, and they ended up being starters. And so the general managers basically said, let's get rid of all this money that goes to the top flight quarterback, and then instead take that money and load up this roster. Let's go out and let's extend guys we didn't think we'd extend before. Let's go out and sign some big names in free agency. Let's go out and add a swing tackle and guard that are expensive that normally we couldn't afford, but now we just want added depth, whether it's the offensive line or defensive line. So you just sort of have this like elevated roster. And football is the ultimate team sport. And so it's not like basketball, like, well, hey, if you have Michael Jordan in his prime, I don't care who you have out there. Football is different. And no matter who you have out there at quarterback, you have to have an offensive line. You have to have the receivers. You have to have a defense. It's this team sport. So going back to your question, sir, I was at that Philly Vikings game, as we all recall, early in the season.
Bloodbath.
In Philly, and Monday Night Football game, it was a bloodbath. I don't know the final score, 37-10 or 31-7 or whatever
Minnesota
it was.
Was never in it. It was ugly.
Never in it. The thing was over right off the bat. And I was like, man, this team is really, really good.
They've been awesome. Whenever Hurts has played and they've been healthy, they've basically killed everybody.
Hurts, here's an interesting stat for you. Hurts, when he has thrown one interception or less, which I always feel like as a quarterback, you're going to throw the ball 30 to 35 times a game. Throwing one interception is not, you should be able to overcome that as a team, right? Like you're going to throw one where it could be a tipped pass too.
Especially now, as many times as you throw,
But in their last 21 games, the Philadelphia Eagles are 20-1 when Jalen Hurts has thrown one interception or less.
Wow.
Kansas City is right in the middle of the pack defensively. You took these. What I love about the NFL this year is that the best four teams, I'd say there's 5 elite teams in the NFL this year. There's Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, San Francisco, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Those 5 teams I thought were sort of a class above everybody else. And of course, 4 of them made it to the championship games. But of all those teams, Kansas City really has the worst defense. They're ranked about 16th in the NFL in defense. They have a couple of really good defensive linemen, but secondary is pretty average. They don't have great cover linebackers. They don't have premier players. And to me, that's going to be the difference. Philadelphia, on the other hand, with that inexpensive quarterback who's, you can't just go out there and get an inexpensive quarterback. You have to get an inexpensive quarterback that also is dynamic. And he has vastly improved as a passer, decision maker, and he has the body of a running back, and he can run when and they use him very effectively. And Jalen Hurts' running ability actually just helps out the Eagles' run ability in general with their running backs. And so they're an extremely efficient football team. They have the weapons on the outside when they get those good one-on-one matchups. I mean, A.J. Brown's a classic example of a player that was traded from one team who had salary cap issues to another team that had the space because of the cheap quarterback, and because that team wanted to go make a run. And he's been a huge value to that team, of course. And then on the other side, they have Devonta Smith, a first-round wide receiver from Alabama, who's a really good player as well. So and the Dallas Goddard. I mean, by the way, I called a Dallas Goddard game, Iowa State versus South Dakota State, and I was like, oh, this kid's. You could just tell he's like, oh, he's one of those diamonds in the rough at a smaller school that'll play in the NFL, and he is a very, very good player. So they just don't have any weaknesses. They really don't. They have like no weaknesses, and I think Sirianni does a great job with the roster, and I think he's become a really, really good head coach at a young age. And I think the Eagles, despite the fact that I'm not a big fan of the Eagles, they're a team this year that I don't think Kansas City is going to beat them.
All right, I got a couple of stats for you. These are gambling stats, but they still tell us a lot about the game, I think. So, teams with the rushing advantage in the Super Bowl all time are 41-15 straight up. If you win the rushing battle, you are 39-14-3 against the spread. So here's another stat. So that's not shocking, right? Like, oh, if you run the football, you win the game. But here, this one's interesting when you stack it up against that one. Teams that average more passing yards per attempt. Okay? Just average passing yards per attempt are 44-12 straight up, 37-16-3 against the spread in Super Bowl games. I guess what does that tell us?
Tells me a couple of things. Well, one, the running the football stat is always interesting because the team it's like when you have 2 candidates that run for president, usually the one that wins has raised the most money in the history of presidential candidates. Well, that sort of goes hand in hand type of thing. So a lot of times the teams that do win the Super Bowl are the teams that are winning and therefore running the ball more. In particular,
for the record,
the football game.
For the record, the Bengals ran for more than the Rams did last year. So it's not perfect, but
not perfect. No. Yeah. But I think that a couple of things. So as we get into the matchup of those stats, Philadelphia's a better running team. This Isaiah Pacheco, I'm not sure, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, the Rutgers kid.
Rutgers kid who never ran for more than 800 yards in college, 7th round pick.
So weird.
Now he's, one of the sort of probably final 4 or 5 guys for Rookie of the Year. It's weird how the NFL works like that. But they're just not a dominant running football team. If Kansas City wins, it's because Pat Mahomes has thrown 40, 50 times, I feel like. I think they're going to throw it all over the field and try to spread them out and get Kelsey in space and get some of those receivers in some space and say, hey, Pat Mahomes, you're going to win this football game. Meanwhile, on the other side, I think Philadelphia is going to be like, we're going to grind it out with, our good running backs and our running quarterback as well. And then just they have a dominant defense. That defensive line is phenomenal that Philadelphia has. And so I just don't see Kansas City running the football. And 2, I think they're going to get pressure when Mahomes tries to throw it. So I think it's a bad matchup for the Chiefs. And as you said, the yards per attempt. Is that what it was? The yards per
Yeah,
attempt?
that was a weird stat
So,
for me to see
well,
that big of a number there, especially against the spread. I mean, that's huge.
it
37,
is
16, and
interesting.
3 just for average attempt.
But we both know that if you throw the ball 50 times, which I feel like the Chiefs are going to throw the ball a lot, 45 times, that usually the more you throw the ball, the shorter your yards per attempt ends up
Yeah,
being,
good
right?
point.
A lot of times you'll see a quarterback that was 15 of 22, but they threw for 275, and it's like, well, that's a big yards per attempt. But when you throw the ball a ton, you end up going, okay, well, we're not going to run the ball very well in this Philadelphia defense. So when we throw it, we can't just be throwing it down the field all the time. Our quarterback's going to get crushed. And so it ends up being bubble screens and hitches and slants, and those end up being little stick routes. Those end up really lowering your yards.
The old
per
Sam
attempt
Bradford
average.
game plan. Saw that a lot when he was wearing purple. Oh, God.
He was accurate though. He was accurate on those.
Son of a bitch
routes.
would complete 90% of his passes and throw for like 112 yards.
Well, with Bradford, you didn't want to get him hurt. I mean, that was the whole thing. Is like, listen, if we take a 7-step drop, there's like a 20% chance our quarterback's going to go on IR, and collect $25 million and do not pass go. I mean, that was sort of like the Sam Bradford experience. As a Viking, we could talk about Viking State. Do we want to talk about Viking State? No, we don't want to talk about Viking State.
No, this is a Super Bowl show. This is anti-Vikings talk here.
I'll tell you this though, Kirk Cousins played great last night in that 7-on-7 game.
Yeah,
he is made for that. If he could do
without
that
getting
year.
hit, yeah, he's perfect in that setting. That's Kirk Cousins to a T. Jesus. All right, here's another thing to ponder. And there's got to be a reason for this, and it's got to be more than just the Cowboys and 49ers were dominant back in the day. But when I was a kid, it seemed like the Super Bowl was generally a blowout.
Yes.
Now, they weren't all. Like, I remember Giants-Bills, right? The Neil O'Donnell game.
Not Neil O'Donnell.
What?
Neil O'Donnell was a quarterback for, like, the Steelers.
Yeah, he wasn't he was the quarterback for the Giants in that year, and then Hostetler came in, right? I believe.
No.
Wait a minute. Neil O'Donnell was okay. I'm getting my very average quarterback.
Chris O'Donnell was in Scent of a Woman with Al Pacino.
Oh, okay. So Phil Simms was hurt, and then Jeff Hostetler came in in '91. That's who I was thinking of. Okay, not Neil O'Donnell. Well, Neil O'Donnell's getting a lot of love here. Maybe you could have him as a guest at some point. But again, it seemed like when I was a kid, the Super Bowl wasn't generally that competitive.
Well, I was born in '78, so my dad's from Chicago, so I grew up a Bears fan, and so early Super Bowls for me were like '85. I guess it was the '86 spring or '86 winter. Of course, that Super Bowl was probably on like January 14th, and now it's like a full month later. But that was, of course, a blowout. It seems like every time the Broncos were in a Super Bowl, that was pretty much a blowout. I'm trying to think. And then the Bills had a couple close wins in there. I think of the 4 that they were in a row, but I feel like 2 of them were blowouts.
Yeah, Dallas scored in the 50s. Yeah,
Dallas just absolutely killed them. Steve Young, when he won his Super Bowl versus the Chargers, that was a blowout at 62 to something or other. And so, but as of late, I feel like the Super Bowls have gotten better and better and better, and a lot of games coming, right down. Really, like when the Patriots, I feel like when the Patriots made their run, 2001, that for the most part, Super Bowls have been very, very close, ever since. Not always great games, like when the Rams lost to the Patriots, 13-3. That was really sort of an ugly game, but it was still a game down to the wire, right down to the end. It wasn't a blowout, but yeah, I feel like in the last 20 years, there have been very few blowouts in the Super Bowl, and they've been a lot of fun to watch. Some coming down to the very, very last play.
Is that analytics? Is that my theory, this is my theory, you tell me if I'm full of shit. I think analytics, like all the teams are smarter. Moneyball, that type of stuff, right? They have these tools to compete even if they're not as talented. And I also think that the Mike Leach influence on the game, where we're throwing more now, and you can take a less talented team and you can, I mean, you're almost encouraged to throw it because the defensive rules are different, right? Like those two things to me, is a novice looking in, would be a big reason for that. Do you buy that? Am I missing something?
I think, yes, I think teams are smarter. Analytics are smarter. Quarterbacks are better. So when they are behind, the team, a team starts to get a lead. It starts to play a little bit more conservatively, naturally, to try to slow, like to sort of bend, don't break on defense. Quarterbacks are so good nowadays to bring them back. The rules of the game are better for offenses to sort of come back when they're behind. Of all the things, though, the salary cap, the collective bargaining agreement has changed everything. Back in those days of the Dallas Cowboys, Chicago Bears, and those 49ers teams, salary cap was very what's the word? It was fluid. It wasn't really precise. Yeah. And like even when the Broncos won their Super Bowls, they may have gotten some trouble for like breaking salary cap rules. There wasn't really a hard cap like there has been for the last, say, 25 years. I think it just gotten more and more precise. Where before it was you could really expand your roster, and so there was a vast array of within the teams. There's a vast array of how much money was spent on the. I mean, Eddie DeBartolo, the DeBartolo family during those 49ers runs. I mean, I can't say those guys were mafia guys, but supposedly they were sort of mafia guys. And so like they were finding every which way to pay players to come to the 49ers. And so they really did have like a loaded roster that the accounting practices just weren't as precise back then. And as the game has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's become more and more precise from like a salary cap standpoint, from an oversight standpoint. And I think that has added value to the parity. We also just did not see the parity in the 80s and 90s that we see today. There's so many teams that are hovering around. I don't know what the number is, but 7-10 to 10-7. That's like half the NFL this year is just like right there. So you get to like I guess it's week 18 now, the 17th game of the year. It seems like there's about 3/4 of teams still have a chance to make the playoffs. And that's not the way it was back in the day. So I just think all the margins, all the fat has gotten cut out, and things have just gotten closer and closer and closer. And that's why the Super Bowls have gotten better and better and have come down a lot of times to the fourth quarter.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time. Get out of here. I know that you're heading off to where are we at? Phoenix. Where are you staying? Phoenix. Do you have like a hotel? Or
got a hotel in Scottsdale. It's an interesting. There's when the Super Bowl is in Phoenix, it's always the same week as the Waste Management Open, the old Phoenix Open. Yep. And so it ends up being sort of a hotel crisis. I mean, Super Bowl is always sort of that way, but this year was particularly bad. So luckily I got it my hotel a couple weeks ago, so I didn't get completely killed on the price. But I'll be in Scottsdale. I've got some media stuff on Wednesday and Thursday. There's an NFLPA function where they do like a Shark Tank for people who are trying to get the NFLPA to invest and also partner with these various companies. I go to that on Wednesday afternoon.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think there's these NFLPA events for old players, and so there's just my agent will send me a list of various events to go to. Maybe I'll get a free bag or something, somewhere along the line. I definitely have to buy some swag for my 7th grade daughter. She wants that a Super Bowl sweatshirt. I think all 7th grade kids just wear sweatshirts and leggings now. That's all my daughter pretty much wears.
My 7-year-old's already there. That's what she wears every day.
That's it. So she's looking up to my daughter who's 12. So that's how it sort of goes. But anyway, I have a list of things to do, and also my parents live in Tucson in the wintertime. So hopefully I have a chance to see them as well. So it should be a good week and get out of the Midwestern cold and enjoy that Phoenix sun.
Tucson's a great city. I love Tucson.
My parents live in the suburbs, which is just looks like the suburbs. But what I love about it is they have incredible sunsets, like the mountains around Tucson. Of course, my parents were at the Gem Show. It's like the most Tucson thing you can possibly do is like 275-year-old people go to a Gem Show in Tucson, Arizona.
The hell is that? Like the
People that
rocks,
have,
like gems.
like little gems and rocks, and they make art out of them and various things like that. It's very
Interesting.
Tucson. If you don't know about a gem show, you don't know anything about Tucson, Arizona. They're like the
Apparently
gem show.
not. I'm politicking for Arizona to get into the Big 12 just so I can go on. I like Tucson. It's like a nice mix between city and it's like still historic and they haven't gone crazy down there. I like it.
No, and it's not that big of a city.
Feels
It's
like Mexico.
the hiking around Tucson is really incredible. We did a visit at the University of Arizona. Is it Arizona University? University of Arizona, probably. A year or two ago with my daughter. She was interested in going there, and I loved that campus. Really a gorgeous campus, sort of like Iowa State. It's just like all right there. There's no streets running through it like within the town. It's very centralized, and of course you see the mountains, and there's nothing prettier than like a sun setting behind a mountain range in the background, and you get a lot of that in Tucson, Arizona. So my parents just love being outdoors in the sun, and that's the reason they went down there. The Midwest it's hard to be outdoors. It's a lot of days of gray, and
we actually, our family yesterday, it was like 45 degrees, and we all went outside, and the girls like rode their bikes, and like we were acting like it was 90 out.
You have to. I think literally you
you gotta take
you have
advantage.
to find a way to get. Big believer in the vitamin D. I had this conversation with the doctor, and they're like, if you looked at people that are sick a lot of times, if you tested them, most of them have some sort of vitamin D deficiency in the Midwest, upper Midwest, especially just because it's so cold and we get so many gray days, and you just end up having a weaker immune system. So I try to get out as much as possible. I'm currently in Austin, Texas. Yesterday I was in shorts and a t-shirt. 75 degrees yesterday. So
well, you take me with you to Tucson, and I'll take you with me to Vegas. We can go stay at Circa.
That sounds wonderful. By the way, hopefully Brock Purdy recovers from this injury. I don't know what information I think it's all sort of, we don't know yet.
I hear like 5 different things, so I'm just waiting to hear from the source at this point.
What a tough deal. But actually, I talked to Drew Brees about it a little bit. He had his elbow repaired. He had UCL injuries also, and so it is something that you can come back from. So hopefully he can come back for it and still play next year. If not, I tell you what, even if he has to take a year off and sort of like a redshirt year, he proved himself to the entire National Football League in his rookie season to go out there. I know he had a really good football team. I know he's got a good coordinator, great defense. Yeah. But it's hard to win 7 games in a row, nearly impossible in the National Football League as a rookie. And Brock Purdy did that, and he really should be proud of the way he competed this year. And I think as an Iowa State fan, it was really, really fun to see of Purdy mania take the NFL by storm this year.
I did something I haven't done in 20 years. I bought a Brock Purdy rookie card.
There you go.
Putting it up in a little frame and just going to sit back on that, and let's see if it turns into Tom Brady in 20 years.
Yeah, you're going to retire in 20 years. It's unbelievable.
I haven't bought a card. I used to. Everybody did it when they were kids. I haven't done that. It's been well over 20 years. I mean,
would you like me to send you a Sage Rosenfels rookie card? I have a box of them.
I would love that.
You would?
Because I actually thought like it was kind of fun. Like what I might do is just buy the Iowa State guys rookie cards.
Yeah.
And that's the only cards I'll buy because I don't care. Like I'm not into this. But it'd be cool to have like, George Niang rookie card, Monte Morris rookie. It just, and that's all I have.
NFL wise, there's this thing called the Rookie Premier, which is sort of like the quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, and then other positions that are like first rounders are all invited to this basically card photo shoot. I feel like it moves around. It's probably more in Los Angeles now. When I did it, it was at the Citrus Bowl? Where did in Orlando, where the Camping World Bowl, that stadium where Iowa State played Notre Dame a couple years ago. We did ours there, but basically all the tops and the Don Russ and Upper Deck, all these they show up and they do photo shoots for all these players. But of course, then they give you here's 1,000 of our card, and you need to sign 1,000 of them, and you're going to get, $7 a card or something like that for just sign your name and then you send them back to them. But then they give you like, here's 50 more just for yourself. And so I have this, like I said, box of all these random rookie cards.
I would love a
out.
Sage Rosenfels rookie card. That would make my day.
I want a Brees Hall rookie card because next year he's going to blow it up.
I actually think that's a good buy low right now because most people have forgotten about him. I bought one of those too, so those are my two.
Brees Hall?
Those are my two cards that I have.
He's got a new offensive coordinator. Is that right? Did they end up getting a hire? I feel like they let go.
They did.
Of his brother Mike, and they've. Yep. I'm trying to think. Is it Nathaniel Hackett? Is he the new?
I don't know.
Coordinator there.
I saw Brees. Sure. I shook his hand on Saturday. I didn't really talk to him much though. He was at Hilton, and I couldn't help but think, watching these people there. I mean, there was a line. He probably took pictures for 30 to 45 minutes after the game on the floor at Hilton. And I couldn't help but remember the controversy when he wore the number 28. People were like, that's Troy's. And like some people are still pissed off about that. And I just remember Campbell being like, I promise he'll earn it. And now you look at him and he's this absolute stud.
Yeah.
And it's just a wild deal. But yeah, really good dude. It was good to see him. Kohler was there. And Owazarike, so they had 3 of the NFL guys were all back.
Every single year, it seems like Coach Campbell is getting more and more guys to the next level. And that's really a tribute to him and his coaching staff. Not only they are recruiting more talent, but it seems to me they're developing that talent because as soon as Brock got to the NFL, as soon as Brees got to the NFL, Charlie, when he got at the end of the season, when he got out there and he was healthy, they're productive. And and I think that Matt does a great job of obviously recruiting more NFL talent to the team, but also developing that talent is a huge part of college football.
All right, brother. Enjoy your weekend and week in the sun. I will stay here freezing in Iowa.
All right. Sounds good.
Appreciate you. He's Sage Rosenfels. I'm Chris Williams. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And Sage will be back either next week or the week after that. We'll find out. Later.